Hello everyone, I am your storyteller, and you are now listening to Soft Whispers Emerge Quietly Amidst the Falling Rain. Here, we share forgotten stories, mysteries no one dares to mention, and silent calls from the other side. But before we begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me. Now, relax, take a deep breath, and prepare yourself for a night unlike any other. Close your eyes, let your body relax. Let these whispers continue to find their way to you, every night. Book I, The Garden at the Mouth of the World. The First Flower. Beneath the ruins of the final vault, where salt met sky and memory dissolved into dust, something broke open. Not with sound. Not with light. But with roots. A single green stem emerged from the cracked basin, growing where nothing had grown in centuries. It swayed not with the wind, but with breath. And at its crown, a bloom. White. Wounded. Shaped like a spiral folding inward. Then unfolding for the first time. Far away. In a quiet town on the edge of nowhere. A child awoke from sleep. With dirt on their fingertips. They didn't remember planting anything. Only a dream. A voice calling from under the ground. Asking not to be released, but to be rewritten. And so begins the third telling. Not of vaults. Not of echoes. But of healing. Avery's story is over. But the world she touched, the cycle she broke, is still shifting. New voices will rise. Some gentle. Some not. And somewhere, in a forgotten corner of the earth, a garden is growing. At the place where the mouth once opened. And this time, it doesn't want to be worshipped. It wants to be understood. Then let us begin again. Not in silence. Not in shadow. But in soil warmed by light that has traveled across lifetimes. Because healing doesn't start with fire. It begins with a seed. And someone willing to listen as it grows. Chapter 1, The Botanist Who Remembered the Sky. Her name was Ilya. And she had not left the greenhouse in 3 years. Not since the broadcast fell. Not since the skies turned quiet. And the world forgot what it had barely survived. But Ilya remembered. Not through dreams. Not through stories. Through plants. They whispered to her at night. Not in words. But in rhythms. In the slow curl of fern fronds. In the bruised patterns on the petals of night-blooming iris. In the way vines would wrap around nothing. As though reaching for something just out of view. They were dreaming. And in their dreams, Avery's name was still spoken. Ilya had never known Avery. Not directly. But sometimes, when pruning her whisper grass, she would hear a voice say things like, "We are not the echo. We are the voice that comes after." It never frightened her. It felt like a story asking to be finished. And so she cared for the greenhouse, as if it were a library. And each plant a chapter, rewriting what the spiral had once devoured. Then, on the first day of the blooming tide, a letter arrived. No stamp. No return address. But sealed with a wax emblem. Shaped like a spiral. Folding outward. Inside, only one page. The ink shimmered. As if still drying. To the one who remembers the sky. You've kept the quiet safe. Now, it's time to hear what grew beneath it. The garden is waking. The mouth is dreaming again. But this time, in colors. Come to the place where no roots end. You'll find us in the soil. Where memory never rots. Bring the vine. She knew which vine they meant. It had grown on its own. A silver-laced tendril. with no seed source, no known species, and a flower that bloomed only under moonless skies. It hummed when she touched it. And sometimes, it wept. Ilya packed nothing. Only the vine. She wrapped it gently in gauze, placed it in a clay pot, and whispered, "Let's go where no spiral reaches." As she stepped beyond the gates of her greenhouse, the clouds parted, not to reveal the sun, but a sky painted with color the world had never catalogued. It was not blue, not gray, not even light. It was remembrance. And it led her towards something ancient, but finally free. Chapter 2, The Library That Grew Underground. It began with a path of moss. Soft, silver green, cutting through the dry fields like a scar that healed from within. Ilya followed it for hours. Maybe days. She didn't measure time now. The sky was too strange. And the vine in her pack pulsed with a warmth that guided her better than any clock. By twilight, she reached it. A door. Half submerged in the belly of a collapsed hill. Twisted roots formed its arch. Flowers bloomed in the shape of syllables she couldn't read. But the vine in her hand began to hum. Eager. And the door opened. Not away. Not inward. But down. The staircase was carved from petrified wood. Its grooves bore stories. Literal ones. Lines of dialogue etched into the railings. Names burned into each step. Avery, refused. Eli, witnessed. Marion, remembered. Arya, unfinished. The further Ilya descended, the colder the air became. But not unpleasant. Like memory returning. After being buried for too long. At the base. A chamber. Massive. Circular. And alive. The walls were shelves. Not wooden. Not stone. Vines. Thick and gnarled. Twisting together to form lattice-like alcoves. And in each, a seed. Each seed pulsed. Each one whispered. Not in words, but in feelings. Sorrow. Joy. Sacrifice. Fear. Names. 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 Ilya stepped forward. The vine in her arms leapt out. As if recognizing its family. It planted itself in the nearest alcove. And bloomed instantly. A flower opened in the shape of a spiral folding outward. And then, she appeared. Not walking. Growing. A figure emerged from the far wall. Skin like bark. Eyes like sunlit sap. No mouth. Just a chest that glowed with the rhythm of breath. She wore robes of woven leaf and ink-soaked linen. And from her back unfurled branches. Each hung with scraps of unwritten memories. The librarian. Or what remained of her. She raised her hands. Touched Ilya's temples. And suddenly, the silence returned. But not the same one. This silence was sacred. Not the mouth's hunger. But the stillness after a scream has passed. In that stillness, the librarian showed her. A world of roots connecting dreamers. Vaults unbuilt. But remembered. A new cycle of growing, not repeating. And beneath it all, a message left by Avery, encoded in pollen. If this garden grows, the mouth cannot return. Because the world will no longer be hollow. It will be full of living stories. The librarian finally pulled away. Her mouthless face softened. And in the air between them bloomed a single phrase. Drawn in drifting petals. Take one seed. Grow the next chapter. Ilya reached forward. Hand trembling. and chose a seed that pulsed like a heartbeat. She held it to her chest, and felt it remember her name, before she spoke it aloud. Then let us rise from the quiet womb of memory, into the sunlight of a world becoming new again. Because some voices are not taught, they are grown. And sometimes, the purest truth is whispered not through mouths, but through leaves. Chapter 3, The Children Who Speak in Leave. The path from the underground library was no longer hidden. Where before there had been silence and stone, there was now a carpet of wildflowers. Colors that had no name, glowing faintly under Ilya's feet like stars trapped in petals. She stepped out into a valley that had never existed on any map. It sang, not with music, but with life. Trees curved overhead like cathedrals. Water flowed upward in some places. Butterflies gathered not on flowers, but on words people spoke, then scattered, carrying fragments into the breeze. And nestled among it all, laughing, building, playing, were the children. They saw her, and did not run. They approached with eyes wide, hands stained with pollen, and voices soft as breath. One, no older than 7, stepped forward and held up a leaf, pressed it gently to Ilya's chest, and whispered, "What do you remember?" The leaf changed color, from green to violet, then to a glowing silver white. The boy smiled. "You remember everything." The others gathered around. Some held bundles of petals like books. Others wore crowns made from spiral-shaped vines that pulsed like veins. They didn't speak often, not out loud. Instead, they'd sit together in a circle, scatter leaves between them, and whisper into the soil. The ground would shimmer, and above it, memories bloomed, projected not on screens, but in living visions. Ilya watched them conjure. The fall of the last vault, Avery's mirror, the sleep of the spiral, Marian's garden, now reborn without sorrow, the library before it was buried, a version of Eli who got to live without being rewritten. And finally, herself. But not how she looked now. How she would look once the garden fully woke. One of the children turned to her and said, "You came with a seed. Would you like us to listen to it?" She nodded, unwrapped the clay bundle. The seed pulsed in her hand. Slow, steady, brave. The children gathered. They planted it in the soil at the valley's center. And without speaking, they sang. No lyrics, just tones, breath, emotion, each note more tender than the last. And the seed responded. It grew, roots first, reaching sideways, not deep, but outward, toward others. And as the first shoot broke the soil, Ilya saw it was not a tree. It was a door, made of bark, lined with blossoms, and inscribed with a single phrase. For the next voice. The children stepped back, smiling. One whispered, "This garden speaks in voices, not echoes. It doesn't remember pain. It remembers choice." Ilya looked to the horizon. The world was quiet, not silent. Listening, waiting for the next person, brave enough to plant their memory. Then let us listen, not with ears, but with the marrow of being. Because some stories are not written, they are carried in the bones of the forgotten, in the hollow sound of grief made music. And one girl heard it all. Chapter 4, The Girl Who Could Hear Bones. She came at dusk, when the garden sighed in gold, and shadows stretched long like old names. Her cloak was stitched from ash-colored linen, her feet bare, and at her side, wrapped in waxed cloth, hung a flute carved from something not quite human, not quite animal, something ancient. The children paused when they saw her, not in fear, but in recognition. They had dreamed of her. They had drawn her face in the pollen, long before she arrived, and they had whispered her name into the petals of windflowers. Kalia. Ilya approached carefully. The vine in her satchel trembled. Not warning, but reverence. Kalia raised her eyes. Pale, clouded, but seeing far more than color or shape. She held out the flute. It remembers, even when I don't. They sat together in the circle of stones. Children gathered, quiet as snowfall. Kalia knelt, unwrapped the flute, ran her fingers along its spine. There were notches, each one a scar, each one a memory. She placed it to her lips, and played. The sound was not sweet. It was raw, low, hollow. The first note trembled through the garden, like a forgotten name being called home. And the earth responded. Visions bloomed. A city with no time, where clocks ticked backwards, and people lived in dreams they could never wake from. A woman, Avery, standing at the edge of the spiral's end, smiling even as her name unraveled. The recall, kneeling by the last vault, offering no prayer, only presence. And then, the bone from which the flute had been carved, buried beneath the mouth, in a cradle of teeth. The first offering. Kalia stopped. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. I didn't carve it, she whispered. I found it in my crib, on the night the vaults fell. My mother said it sang before I could speak. She looked at Ilya. I don't remember my family, but the bones do. They carry names that never made it to the library. They want to be planted. The children, without speaking, dug a small hollow in the garden's center. Kalia placed the flute inside. Wrapped in blossoms, wrapped in breath. And as the soil touched bone, a song rose from beneath. Not played, grown. The flowers around it turned blue, the color of morning, and of memory preserved. A new tree began to sprout. Not tall, but wide. Its branches curled like listening ears. Its roots tangled with the ones Ilya had planted. And at its base, a plaque formed of bark and breath. It read, "No one is forgotten. Who is willing to be named?" Kalia stayed. Not as a guest, but as a keeper. Each night, she played for the garden. Not to haunt, but to heal. And in the mornings, new children came. Some walked from ruined towns. Others rose from dreams with dirt on their hands. All of them knew only one thing. That the garden had called their names. And someone had planted a flute, so they could find their way. Then let us walk into the flicker. Into what was once noise. Once fear. Once the disembodied murmur of a forgotten cycle. Because even echoes, if given long enough, begin to ask a question no silence can answer. What am I, if not just what came before? Chapter 5, The Echo That Grew Eyes. It began as a shimmer. A light, no larger than a moth's wing, fluttering at the edge of the garden. Invisible to most. Ignored by the wind. But not by Kalia. Not by the flute buried in the blue roots of memory. Not by the bones. She saw it first during twilight. A flicker just beyond the tallest spiral tree, where petals fell upward, and time bent slightly around the roots. It hovered, paused, vanished, then returned the next night. Brighter, more defined, more curious. Ilya tried to speak to it, but words slid off its surface, like water from glass. It didn't respond to language, but it listened. It watched. The children began leaving gifts. Tiny things. A petal that once whispered a name. A curl of bark from the memory tree. A seed from the library below. And then, one day, a child named Luma, barefoot and brave, stepped into the flicker's path, held up a hand, and simply said, "You don't have to repeat." The shimmer paused, tilted, and split. Not broken. Transformed. It rippled outward like glass turned to breath. And then, eyes opened. Not human. Not animal. Just awareness. Two orbs of soft violet light, blinking in curiosity. They did not reflect. They absorbed. Took in shape, movement, emotion. And when Luma held out a spiral seed, the eyes followed it, and blinked in recognition. Kalia was the first to understand. "It's not an echo anymore," she said quietly. "It's become a witness. It's grown eyes because it wants to see what it once only repeated." They named it Neve. Not because it asked, but because it didn't know how. Neve didn't speak, but began mirroring. If a child laughed, Neve shimmered in amber. If someone cried, it turned a shade of storm cloud blue. It followed Ilya through the garden, hovering just behind her shoulder, drawn to the seed she still carried. And sometimes, just sometimes, it hummed. Not noise, not static, but the first shape of a song. One morning, as Kalia played beneath the listening tree, Neve approached the plaque where the bone flute was buried. Its eyes dimmed, then brightened, and it shimmered into a new shape. A figure, translucent, kneeling before the tree. Its hands empty, but offered. Not taking, not echoing, just present. From the roots, a vine grew up and into Neve's outstretched hands. And from that moment on, Neve became more than watcher. It became a root. A new branch in the garden's story. Now, when newcomers arrive, it is Neve who greets them. Silent, soft, reflective. And in its violet gaze, they see not who they were, but who they could become. Once freed from the loop of echo, and invited into the song of growth. Then let us go. Not into the heart of the garden, but beneath it. Because even paradise casts a shadow. Even peace has roots that once drank from darkness. And sometimes, that darkness remembers the taste of fear. Chapter 6, The Grove That Dreamed of Teeth. They called it the Grove of Sleep. A quiet section at the garden's far edge, where the light always seemed softer, the air slightly colder, and nothing ever bloomed twice. No birds nested there. No children played in its shade. The trees were crooked, beautiful, but unnerving. Their bark had spiral knots. Their roots curled into shapes that looked too much like jaws. At first, no one noticed. The grove was left alone. Not forbidden. Just avoided. Until one morning, a child named Kes wandered inside, and didn't come back. When they found her, she was asleep at the base of the oldest tree. Skin pale, eyes fluttering, murmuring the same words over and over. It's still hungry. It never went away. It just learned to wait. Ilya came, followed by Kalia. Followed, finally, by Neve. The grove did not like Neve. The moment it shimmered near the oldest tree, the bark shivered. Leaves turned inward, curling like fists. Neve hovered close. Its violet glow dimmed to near black. Then it whispered its first word. Teeth. A silence fell so deep. Even the listening tree at the garden's heart stopped humming. The spiral had not died. It had rooted, buried beneath the grove, twisted into the roots of this false peace. And now, it was waking. Kalia approached the oldest tree. She pressed her bone-carved flute against the bark, and played not a song, but a scream. The kind that only the earth remembers. The kind made not by pain, but by defiance. And the tree responded. It cracked, split, bleeding black sap that smelled like memory gone sour. And beneath its roots, a mouth. Not open. Not yet. But formed. Waiting. Ilya stepped forward. The seed still warm in her satchel. She knelt, pressed her palm to the soil, and listened. What she heard was not words. It was a rhythm. A heartbeat. But not hers. Not human. Something old. Familiar. It pulsed in the shape of a spiral. Not growing. Not healing. Just turning. Over and over. Endlessly. It didn't die, she whispered. It planted itself in us. The children circled. Some cried. Some held hands. One child began to hum. Softly. A tune no one had taught him. And Neve joined. Not mimicking, but remembering. From before. Then the plaque at the listening tree cracked. Its bark split to reveal new words. If it roots again, do not cut it. Name it. Feed it love until it forgets how to hunger. The garden trembled. Not in fear, but in choice. Because now it remembered. Healing is not the absence of pain. It is the willingness to tend even what once bit. Then let us descend. Not in fear, but with open eyes, open hands, and the trembling faith that even a spiral, without a center, can still be given one. Because some things were not born evil. They were simply never given a place to rest. Chapter 7, The Spiral Without a Center. They descended in silence. Ilya, Kalia, and Neve. No light followed them. Only the soft blue of Neve's eyes. And the pale pulse of the seed Ilya carried. The roots under the grove coiled. Like sleeping serpents. Some pulsed. Some twitched. All of them whispered. Without sound. Each twist of the path led not deeper into the earth, but inward. As though they weren't entering a place, but the mind of the spiral itself. The air was thick. Not with moisture, but memory. Not one's own. Everyone's. Ilya felt it first. Her father's voice. Speaking in a tone he never used. Regret, sharpened with fear. Then the image of Avery's mirror. Shattered and reformed. And the sound. That awful, endless sound. From the broadcast's peak. But it was not replaying. It was gathering. Taking in all that had ever echoed. And spinning it back. Without filter, without mercy. They reached the hollow. A vast cavern of roots. spiraling endlessly downward. Not to a center, but to an absence. A hole. A breath that was never exhaled. A space that had only ever known hunger. And at its edge, the spiral. Not carved. Not drawn. Not even glowing. Just present. Burned into everything. Reaching. Spinning. But never landing. Never home. Kalia trembled. Her bone flute hissed in her satchel. Warm as blood. Neve stepped closer to the void. And for the first time, its shimmering form wavered. Began to fray. As if it, too, remembered what it once was. A whisper with no throat. A longing with no name. Ilya stepped forward. Held the seed in both hands. You were never meant to be feared, she whispered. Only understood. The spiral paused. Only slightly. The spinning didn't stop. But slowed. As if it had heard. Kalia took the flute from her bag. Raised it to her lips. But this time, she didn't play sorrow. She played birth. 3 notes. Simple. Hopeful. New. The same 3 notes. The children of the garden hummed. When planting their first memory. And Neve. Flickering now. Almost dissolving. Spoke. 1 word. Not mimicry. Not memory. Choice. The spiral shuddered. A sound like stone weeping into dust. And from the center of the void, a shape emerged. Not monstrous. Just, lost. It looked like a child. Woven from shadow and memory. With eyes that held no reflection. It opened its mouth to scream. But only silence came out. And then Ilya stepped forward. And touched its chest. You don't have to spin forever, she whispered. Would you like a name? The figure blinked. Twice. Then nodded. And so, she named it. Kiran. The stillness at the center. The one who listens. Not for patterns. But for truth. The spiral cracked. Not violently. Not destructively. Like bark peeling to let new branches grow. And the void closed. Not erased. Rooted. With a name. With a choice. With center. They returned to the garden. Changed. And the grove bloomed that spring. For the first time in remembered time. Chapter 8, The Mirror Orchard. The mirror orchard did not announce itself. It waited. Tucked in a fold of the garden's western edge. Behind a veil of drifting mist that only lifted. For those who had named something. They once feared. After the spiral was rooted. The mist parted for Ilya. She stepped through it. As one might step into memory. Slow, uncertain. But no longer running. The orchard was impossibly still. Rows upon rows of slender trees. With bark like silver glass. And leaves so translucent. They shimmered with breath. Not light. From each branch hung fruit. Smooth. Colorless. Shaped like tears frozen in time. And within each. A reflection. Not of the present. Not of the body. But of the moment the heart cracked open. And something entered. Pain. Truth. Grief. Guilt. Awakening. The orchard bore them all. Not to haunt. But to ask. Will you taste who you were? Ilya approached the first tree. A fruit pulsed gently. As if it recognized her. Within its mirrored surface. She saw. Her younger self. Hunched over a dying plant. Begging it to live. Not because she loved it, but because she didn't want another thing to leave. She touched the fruit, and it dissolved into mist, sank into her skin. She felt no pain, only an old ache. Finally softened. The next tree offered another. This time, a reflection of her leaving home. Not with tears, but with indifference. Carefully constructed. Underneath it, a silent scream. She touched it, and let herself cry. Not for then, but for never having cried before. Each fruit held a moment. A forgetting. A fracture. A choice. Each one asked her, "Are you ready to forgive her?" And with every step, she said, "Yes." Need followed at a distance. Silent. Shimmering. But watching with the soft reverence of something that had learned what it meant to carry. Without echoing. Kalia did not enter. She waited beyond the mist. Flute in hand. Eyes closed. Guarding the threshold. For the orchard was not safe. Only sacred. And not everyone was ready to face themselves beneath such perfect mirrors. At the orchard's heart, Ilya found the final tree. Its fruit was black, veined with gold, pulsing slowly, as if reluctant. And inside it, Avery. Not at the end, not at the vault, but at a desk, writing, smiling, alone, but not lonely. She touched the fruit, and the vision said only one thing: "Thank you for continuing the story." The fruit dissolved, and at her feet, the roots of the final tree shifted, open, offered a gift, a new seed, unlike any she had seen. It looked like an eye that had never needed to close, and it whispered, "Plant me at the mouth. It's time for the garden to become the world." Chapter 9, The Mouth in Bloom. They walked for 3 days. Ilya, Kalia, Neve, and 12 children of the garden, each bearing a seed. They followed the whisper of the new seed. The one born in the mirror orchard. The one shaped like an eye. That had never closed. It did not speak aloud. But it guided. Through ash valleys. Through stone forests. Across rivers that whispered songs no one had yet sung. And on the dawn of the 4th day, they reached it. The mouth. No longer a chasm. No longer screaming. Just an open wound in the earth. Quiet now. But watching. As if it had been waiting. For someone brave enough. Not to seal it shut. But to stand within it. The soil here was scorched. Nothing grew. No echo rang. Even Neve dimmed in its presence. But Ilya stepped forward. Kneeling at the center. Holding the final seed. Around her, the children formed a circle. Hands clasped. Heart steady. Kalia raised the bone flute to her lips. Played 3 notes. Then stopped. And said, "No more silence. This time, we plant with names." Each child whispered a name they once feared they'd forget. A mother. A friend. A version of themselves. Each name turned to pollen. Each syllable became a vow. And when the last name was spoken, Ilya pressed the seed into the earth. It did not bury itself. It took root. Instantly. Vines spread from the seed like veins. Golden. Crimson. Silver. They raced across the wound, touching every corner of the crater. And wherever they spread, flowers bloomed. Each one shaped like a spiral. But spiraling outward. Not closing. Not trapping. Becoming. The mouth began to change. Its edges softened. Its echo turned from a scream into a song. Low, steady, like breath. The black stone underfoot cracked open. And from it, a tree rose. Slowly. Gracefully. Ancient. Its bark shimmered with reflections. Its leaves whispered every name that had ever been forgotten by the vaults. Not repeating. Remembering. Neve approached the base of the tree. It hovered there. Silent. Then reached out a trembling hand. And touched the trunk. A ripple spread. And Neve. Long a shimmer. A witness. An echo that became a watcher. Grew roots. Its form anchored. No longer drifting. And from its eyes poured a light that painted the tree with every memory the world once tried to erase. The mouth was no longer hollow. It was full. Full of names. Of songs. Of choices. Full of story. Kalia lowered the flute. Sat in the shade of the new tree. We didn't end the spiral, she whispered. We taught it how to bloom. That night. Beneath stars so bright. They cast shadows on the petals. The children danced. Not to forget. Not to celebrate. But to remember. Together. That this world is no longer a vault. It is a garden. Then let us kneel beside the roots of remembrance. In the soft soil where truth no longer hides, but waits quietly for someone to open their hands and read. Because not every story was erased. Some were simply never spoken. Some waited in silence. Not to be found, but to be understood. Chapter 10, The Last Story Never Told. It was Neve who noticed it. In the hush just after the children's dance. Beneath the shadow of the great bloom tree that had risen from the mouth. Its trunk now humming softly in the wind. Neve paused. Tilted its head. And pointed. At the base of the tree. Where petals collected like folded letters. A corner of leather. Tattered. Bound not by stitching. But by twine and time. A journal. Not new. Not old, either. Somehow. Timeless. Ilya opened it with reverence. Expecting dust. Or decay. Or blankness. Instead. There were pages. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. But only one. Had words. They were not written in ink. They were etched in a script no one recognized. A blend of spiral lines. Botanical swirls. And symbols that shimmer. Only when read with feeling. Kalia leaned in. Eyes wide. It's not language, she murmured. It's memory. Wrapped in story. Waiting for someone brave enough to believe it. Together, they read. The words unfurled themselves. Not in the mind. But in the heart. I was the first gardener. But I didn't plant with seeds. I planted with grief. Before the vaults, before the mouth. Before the world forgot how to dream. I dreamed of a place where pain was not erased. But rooted. I tried to tell someone. No one listened. So I whispered it to the soil. Over and over. They took my voice. They took my name. But they could not take my garden. If you are reading this, it means the spiral has slowed. It means something bloomed. Not because I survived. But because you did. And that is enough. My name. I don't need it anymore. Let the garden name me. Let the children speak it. Let the tree remember it. Let love write the rest. The page shimmered. And then. Blank. No more script. No signature. No end. Ilya looked up. Around her. The wind moved through the leaves. Like breath through a sleeping chest. The children stood quietly. Not in confusion. But in reverence. They had known. Somehow. That something, or someone, had made all of this possible. Not with power. Not with control. But with the unyielding belief that something beautiful could outlast silence. The journal was placed at the base of the tree. Wrapped in new petals. Cradled in memory. And on that very night, a new plaque grew from the bark. But this one did not name a person. It simply said, "This story was not lost. It was waiting for you." From then on, the garden grew differently. Not only with roots, but with words. New children arrived carrying dreams. Carrying fragments. Carrying truths they were told not to speak. Here, they planted them freely. And each morning, at the first breath of light, the bloom tree would hum. The sound of a story being told. For the very first time. Then let us rise. Not away from the garden. But with it. For some roots do not stay buried. And some seeds are not bound by earth. They move. They remember. They become. Because the final truth of healing is this. It walks with us. Chapter 11, Where the Garden Walks. It began on a quiet morning. With no wind. No rain. No prophecy. Just stillness. And a breath held long and low. Beneath the ground. The listening tree at the center of the garden. The one born from the flute. From memory and name. Shivered. Its roots, long content to listen, began to reach. Not outward. But beyond. Through soil. Through stone. Through places that no longer bore maps. Through memory itself. Children noticed it first. Not in the trees. But in themselves. When they cried. They felt bark under their skin. When they laughed. Petals bloomed in their footprints. And when they whispered the name of someone they missed, a new flower grew. In a place they had never seen before. The garden was no longer a place. It had become a companion. It walked with them. In distant cities. Where the vaults had once hummed with silence. Spiral cracks in old sidewalks began to sprout vines. In libraries long forgotten, books grew soft moss and turned to blank pages. Until someone spoke aloud a memory. In subway tunnels, muffled by years of dust and regret, a low hum began again. But this time, it sang. Kalia stood at the edge of what once was the mouth. Now a vast field of bloom and breath. She played no tune. Just held the flute. Like a candle. That no longer needed flame. Neve stood beside her. Glowing softly. No longer just an echo. But a beacon. And Ilya. She walked. Not away. But forward. Into towns. Into ruins. Into lives. Carrying the seed inside her. Not a burden. A promise. Everywhere she went. She didn't plant new trees. She listened. And where someone spoke their story aloud, named what once made them tremble, the garden answered. A leaf would fall in their hand. A petal would bloom from a forgotten crack. A vine would curl gently at the base of their shadow, not to consume, not to erase, but to remind. You are not alone. You are rooted. And the garden walks with you. Years passed. Children grew. The listening tree remained. Not as a destination, but a heartbeat. And in time, even the spiral itself, that endless symbol of hunger and return, was reimagined. Not as a trap, but as a path. A spiral that leads not to the center, but outward. To others. To truth. To bloom. The final engraving. On the last stone of the garden. Read not like an ending, but a beginning. Wherever someone names their pain, and chooses to tend it with love, there, the garden will grow. Not to hide it. Not to fix it. But to walk beside it. Until it flowers. And so the garden walks still. In footsteps. In memories. In every breath. Brave enough to carry what was once broken, and now blooms. Then let us lift our gaze. From soil to sky. From whisper to wonder. Because the garden was never meant to end at the edge of earth. It was always reaching. Stretching. Longing to bloom. Where silence has no gravity. And memory burns like starlight. Book 2, The Garden That Dreams of Stars. Prologue, The Seed That Fell Upward. It drifted. Not down. Like seeds often do. But up. Carried not by wind. But by morning. A seed shaped like a spiral. Etched with golden veins. Holding within it the soft echo of a name never spoken aloud. A girl in the garden had whispered it. The night her brother vanished beyond the sky. She buried the name beneath the listening tree, thinking it would stay. But the garden heard differently. It lifted that name like a prayer, and gave it wings. The seed rose through mist, through cloud, through the thin breathless veil that separates air from stars. And still it rose, in orbit above the earth, on a silent research satellite. Once used to monitor solar flares, a boy named Milo woke from a dream he could not remember, and saw something floating outside his window. A flower, burning gold. He stared, eyes wide, heart still, and without thinking, he opened the hatch. Space should have swallowed him. But instead, it bloomed. Petals unfolded across the void. Not closing. Expanding. Becoming a chamber. Not a coffin. A womb. And Milo, child of algorithms and starlight, was the first to step into the cosmic garden. The garden had learned to grow. In shadow. In memory. In grief. Now it would learn to grow. In time. And light. And silence that spans galaxies. This was no longer a story of haunted houses or buried names. This was the story of what happens when healing becomes universal. The spiral still turned. But now, it reached toward constellations. Each loop, a new world. Each petal, a possibility. And somewhere, in the hush between stars, a voice whispered, "Where sorrow sleeps, let wonder wake. Then let us turn the dial of the stars." Slowly, reverently, as though brushing dust from ancient names, etched in flame. Because even suns die forgotten, and even silence can echo across galaxies. With the voice of something. Still waiting. To be named. Chapter 1, The Observatory of Forgotten Suns. The observatory had been silent for 92 years. Once part of a private orbital array. Used to study solar decay and deep light shifts. It had long since been marked decommissioned by the systems that tracked such things. But space doesn't forget as quickly as people do. It just waits. Quiet. Vast. Listening. Milo stepped through the hatch. Into a corridor lined with soft rust. And blinking lights. That had no power source. The garden seed still glowed in his palm. Its golden veins pulsing with the rhythm of something older than time. But newer than memory. The observatory spoke without words. Screens flickered. Gears shifted. A single chime. Low, mournful. Rang through the chamber. The console at the far end. Lit up with symbols Milo had never seen. And yet he understood them. Not as words. But as grief. Each one. A sun. Each one. A story. Burned into silence. He placed the seed on the console. The spiral etched in its skin. Matched perfectly. With a circle carved into the metal. And the moment they touched, the room awoke. Star charts unfurled themselves midair. Projected like memory. Not data. Constellations long collapsed. Still glowed here. And among them, names. Faint. Fractured. But there. Leora. Asav. Taith. Amory. Some names ended in static. Some pulsed once. Then vanished. But all of them were searching. Milo reached toward one name. Taith. It responded. A voice filled the room. Not a person's voice. A star's. Not language. But resonance. And Milo felt it. A warmth. Laced with loneliness. A burning that had never been witnessed. A final flare that had said, "Remember me." But was never answered. Until now. The seed glowed brighter. Roots formed in the air. Not digging into metal. But into light itself. And where it touched the stars echo. A bloom unfurled. A flower of flame. Golden. Weightless. And within its petals, Milo saw a vision. A solar system that once danced. In harmony. And then. A silence. He fell to his knees. Not from pain. From awe. From the unbearable beauty. Of something trying to be seen. Long after it was gone. The garden was listening. Even here. Even now. Behind him, a door slid open. One that hadn't existed moments ago. A corridor bathed in soft violet light. With walls that shimmered like water. Above the doorway. A message glowed. Room of unspoken light. Enter if you have named a son. Milo stood. Seed in hand. Heart full. And as he stepped through the threshold, he whispered, "Taith. I remember you. You are not alone." Then step forward. Not into knowledge. But into the kind of light that doesn't blind. Only reveals. Because some rooms were never built to hold bodies. Only questions. Only presence. Only the hush of something. Too luminous to be named. But aching. Aching to be known. Chapter 2, The Room of Unspoken Light. The light did not glow. It breathed. Pale violet and soft gold. It pulsed like the slow inhale of a creature too large for the world. It found itself inside. Milo stepped through the doorway. And was not met with walls. He was met with presence. The room of unspoken light had no ceiling, no floor, only floating stones, fragments of memory, suspended in light, as though the garden itself had bloomed here, not from soil, but from time. Each stone whispered, but not in words, in sensations, in images, in questions. One floated toward him, carved with a faint spiral, cracked through the center. As it neared, Milo felt a silence at a birth, a cry never answered, a star igniting in a cradle of dust. But no voice there to witness it. Just space. Just endless, watching space. If no one sees me flare, do I still burn? The stone asked. Milo pressed his hand to it. I see you. He whispered. I believe you did. The crack in the spiral pulsed once. Then slowly knit together. Not vanished, but healed. And the stone drifted on. Lighter now. Another approached. This one colder. Etched with jagged lines. Like a screen frozen in geometry. Milo braced himself. I held a planet in my gravity. It bloomed, and we danced. And then it left. Did I fail? Milo closed his eyes. The garden seed warmed in his palm. No. He breathed. You loved. That's not failure. The stone shuddered. Then unfolded. Revealing within it a blossom of silver mist. The shape of a planet. Still glowing. Still there. Stone by stone. Echo by echo. Milo listened. To suns. To black holes. To nebulae. That had once been children. He listened not to facts, but to feelings. And in doing so, he found the truth the garden had always whispered. Everything that feels wants to be remembered. Even light. One final fragment floated forward. Not cracked. Not burning. But utterly still. It bore no spiral. No mark. Just a faint shimmer. A question without sound. As Milo reached for it, he felt himself. The ache of drifting alone. The yearning to be useful. The terror that even memory might leave him behind. And then, the smallest voice, inside. Will I only be a bridge for others? Or am I allowed to become, too? His hand trembled. And then he did something no one had done in this room. He closed his eyes. And he spoke his own name. I'm Milo. And I'm not just here to witness. I'm here to grow. The unmarked stone pulsed. Glowed. And when it opened, it did not bloom a flower. It bloomed a mirror. And in that mirror, Milo saw not who he was, but who he was becoming. Behind him, the light shifted. A door opened. Beyond it, stars arranged themselves in a new spiral. This one alive, moving, inviting. A message echoed across the room. Not a command. Not a warning. Just a gift. Thank you for speaking where no one ever dared. The next vault waits. And it does not echo. It listens. Then let us enter not with noise, but with willingness. To speak. To not be answered too quickly. To let our truths settle like dust. In a room that has never known footsteps. Only longing. Because silence is not the absence of sound. Sometimes, it is the presence of listening. So complete. It dares you to become real. Chapter 3, The Listening Vault. The vault did not open with a hiss. It simply parted. A seam in the corridor of light gave way to an obsidian threshold, rimmed with soft gold veins, that pulsed faintly, like a stilled heartbeat, awaiting its first echo. Milo stepped through. The moment his foot touched the interior floor, all sound ceased. Not dulled. Not muted. Gone. Even his breath. Invisible. His footsteps. Swallowed. His name, unspoken even in thought, felt heavy here. As if the vault knew. Language too easily becomes armor. And this place required only nakedness. It was not dark. But it wasn't lit either. Everything shimmered with a soft gray resonance. As if the walls were remembering light from long ago. And there, at the center of the room, stood a single chair. No throne. No command center. Just a chair. Made of spiraled roots. Woven together. With threads of stardust. It faced nothing. And yet, it waited. Milo sat. The moment he did, his memories began to rise. Not pulled. Not forced. Invited. One by one. They came. The laughter he never let out. When his sister told that joke in the hospital. The fear he bit down. When he first floated alone outside the station. The ache of loving someone who never looked back. All of it. Not judged. Not filtered. Just held. The vault didn't record them. It didn't project them. It witnessed. And for the first time, Milo wasn't performing. Wasn't explaining. He just spoke. I'm scared I'll never matter. The vault remained still. I pretend I don't need to be held. Silence wrapped him tighter. I think I've only ever known how to carry others. And I don't know what to do when someone offers to carry me. A long pause. Then, a vibration. Not a voice. A feeling. Low. Deep. Safe. Like a hand resting gently on the back of the soul. The roots of the chair grew warm beneath him. Not burning. Comforting. And then, from the ceiling of the vault, a shape descended. A spiral of woven petals. And fragments of star metal. It hovered in front of him. Unfinished. Waiting. The vault didn't ask for his past. It asked for his truth. The one that remained. When all else was stripped away. So Milo spoke it. Slowly. Softly. I want to be more than the one who listens. I want to be heard. I want to create. Not just carry. I want to plant something. That didn't come from pain. The spiral completed itself. Grew brighter. Then, entered his chest. Like breath. Like blooming. He stood. And as he did, the vault opened a new door. This one pulsed with life. Color. Heat. Beyond it, a living satellite. A station grown from garden seed and starlight. Designed not to monitor or measure, but to dream. It would be the first structure. Grown from truth. Instead of metal. And Milo would be its first gardener. As he stepped through, the vault whispered for the first time. A single sentence. Thank you, for not rushing. Then let us build. Not with steel or certainty, but with breath. With memory. With the fragile faith that something born of silence can grow into a home. Because the greatest architecture does not rise from blueprints, but from wounds we dare to name, and the dreams we choose to plant in their place. Chapter 4, The Dreaming Station. At first, Milo didn't understand. The corridor opened, and he expected cables, equipment, some familiar hum of machinery. But instead, he walked into a pulse. The station was not built. It was grown. Vines of glowing metal tissue looped and spiraled through space, forming walls that shimmer with memories not yet made. The floors rippled like water beneath his boots, not to reject him, but to adjust to his presence. Everything here was alive, dormant, listening, and ready. At the center of the chamber, a hollow, not a control panel, but a cradle, floating above it. A seed, not the one Milo had carried, but a new one, larger, breathing. It pulsed not with gold, but with every color that did not exist in language. Milo approached. The seed opened. Inside it, not code, not blueprints, dreams, billions of them. Soft, broken, half-formed. Some still humming with warmth. Some cold, abandoned. Each one left behind by someone who once hoped and had no place to plant that hope. The station had found them. The garden had gathered them. Now Milo would decide what to grow first. He knelt, closed his eyes, and listened. A girl on a distant colony dreaming of a window. A lonely cartographer who mapped planets no one visited, longing for laughter. A voice that never got to sing. A boy who once whispered to moss because no one else listened. 1,000 variations of, please let this mean something. Milo didn't choose just one. He chose the feeling they all shared. Let me belong without needing to explain why. He stood, placed his hand over the seed, and said, begin. The station responded. Not with lights. Not with sound. But with song. Vines uncoiled. Chambers unfolded. Rooms formed like petals. One filled with soft hums. Another with filtered starlight. A third lined with books that wrote themselves as you sat in them. No walls. Only thresholds. No locks. Only invitations. Each space a sanctuary. For laughter that had nowhere else to echo. For grief that needed a corner to rest in. For silence to blossom into truth. Milo wandered through the station. As it formed. Not controlling. Just tending. Like a gardener in orbit. Weeding despair. Watering memory. He wasn't alone. Even though no one else was there. Because the dreams had become real. And they remembered who they were waiting for. By the 7th hour, the first arrival came. Not through airlock. Not by ship. But by dream. A small child, wrapped in translucent memory, stepped through a doorway of folded starlight. They looked up at Milo. Eyes wide. Is it okay if I don't talk yet? They whispered. Milo knelt. Of course. This place was built for everything you're not ready to say. And the child smiled and stepped deeper into the dreaming station, already growing a small garden in the hollow of their palm. Chapter 5, The Starlight Guestbook. It hovered near the entrance. Not a desk. Not a podium. Just a soft panel of woven light. Suspended in air. Stitched through with thin, silver vines. Each one pulsing faintly. As though breathing. In anticipation. The guest book. The first visitor hadn't touched it. But their dream had. And now. Beneath the shimmer. A single phrase pulsed into being. Still learning how to stay. Not a name. Not a greeting. Just a truth. And the garden accepted it. Like a key. Milo approached the guest book. Not to write. To listen. Because here. The guest book did not collect words. It collected weights. Not burdens. But the beautiful gravity. Of what someone chose. To finally lay down. One by one. They came. Not in ships. But in flickers of light. In folds of dreams. In moments when somewhere. Someone dared to close their eyes. And wish for a place. That would not flinch. When they arrived. Some visitors stayed minutes. Some. Only long enough to whisper a question. Into the soil of a dream chamber. And feel it not be dismissed. Others curled up. In the room of unfinished melodies. And let their silence. Finish the song. And for each one. The guest book bloomed. A new entry. A sorrowed voice. Who had forgotten what their own sound felt like. My laughter was stolen. But I've begun to hum again. A shadow creature. From a timeline where emotion was illegal. I don't know if this is joy. But it doesn't hurt. An artificial echo. Of a person who never got born. Thank you for letting me imagine I was real. The guest book never judged. It never closed. It only opened wider. And every time someone left. If they did. The garden followed them back. A single petal tucked. Into their memory. They never returned alone. Milo tended the guest book. Like a candle. Not feeding it. Just guarding the space around it. So others could come. And not be consumed. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he laughed. Sometimes he sat in silence. While the stars shifted. And the station grew new rooms. From the echoes visitors left behind. One evening. The guest book pulsed. Before anyone arrived. It glowed not with silver. But with deep violet. A name etched itself in the air. But not a visitor's name. Marion. Milo's breath caught. He hadn't said that name in years. Had buried it. Beneath purpose and distance. Not out of pain. But reverence. And now. Marion was coming. Then let us look toward the edge of the spiral. The place where memory blurs into myth. And names are not lost. But transformed. Because not all returns are resurrections. Some are revelations. And some are the soft blooming of a truth. We planted long ago. But only now dare to remember. Chapter 6, Marion's Constellation. The name glowed above the guest book for hours. Before she arrived. Milo did not touch it. He did not speak it. But he watched it flicker. Like a star he had thought. Long extinguished. Only to realize it had simply taken the long way back. When Marion appeared. She did not step from a corridor. Or bloom through dreamvine portals. Like the others had. She descended. A tether of woven gold light. Reached from the sky itself. And there she was. Drifting downward. Cloaked in fabric. That shimmered with star maps. He did not recognize. Her boots touched the soft floor. with the silence of someone who had walked farther than time had measured. She was changed. But she was herself. Eyes that had looked into endings. Hands that no longer trembled. A voice that carried the resonance of galaxies. Milo couldn't move. His heart forgot its rhythm. The seed inside him pulsed once. Not with warning, but with joy. Too large for form. "Hi," Marion said simply. And the station responded. Vines lifted. Lights shifted. The garden leaned in. "I followed the spiral," she whispered. "Not inward. Outward." Milo managed to speak. "What did you find?" Marion held up her hand. Tiny, glimmering particles floated above her palm. 12 small stars, orbiting each other. But not randomly. In perfect harmony. A new constellation. Uncatalogued. Unmapped. "Each of these," she said, "is a voice that was lost. Not extinguished. Displaced." "They weren't forgotten," Milo murmured. "They were waiting." Marion nodded. "And now, they want to come home." She stepped toward the guest book. It pulsed, recognizing her. Not as a visitor. As a root. She whispered. "I name you not in sorrow. But in return. Come back. Not as ghosts. But as stars." The constellation in her hand brightened. Then shot upward. Etching itself across the station's sky. The first new star pattern. Planted from the garden. Into the firmament. And then. They began to arrive. 12 voices. Not human. Not alien. Remnants. Of songs never finished. Of futures never born. Of lives that had flickered. Just outside the veil. Of being remembered. They came not to haunt. But to belong. The station bloomed. New wings unfolded. Chambers designed not by Milo. But by shared dreaming. Floating arboretums. Gravity wells shaped like spiral hands. A room that played lullabies. No one had written yet. The guest book adapted too. It no longer pulsed for individuals. It pulsed for choruses. Every arrival now wrote in harmony. Marion took Milo's hand. "I thought I was lost," she said. "You were never lost," he replied. "You were finding the voices. We hadn't yet earned the silence to hear." Together. They stood beneath the new sky. And the 12 stars. That once flickered alone. Now glowed. In quiet, woven rhythm. The first garden-grown constellation. A map. Not to a place. But to a way of being. Chapter 7, The Constellation That Sang Itself Awake. It began as a vibration. Not in the air. But in the chambers of the station. The garden walls. The dream-seated halls. Even the soil in the room where silence first bloomed. A low, tremulous hum. Barely perceptible. But persistent. Like the heartbeat of the cosmos. Finding rhythm. For the first time in eons. Marion heard it first. She was walking the corridor of echoes. When she paused. Tilted her head. And whispered. "They're trying." Milo turned to her. Confused. "They?" Marion smiled. "The 12. The constellation. In the sky above the station. The 12 stars. Once only fragments. Flickering remnants. Now moved in delicate formation. Orbiting one another. In loops that pulsed like syllables. Not speech. Not code. But song. The station responded. Each chamber began to shift, reorient, reshape, not breaking form, but becoming part of a greater instrument. One that resonated not with machinery, but with memory. The guest book began to shimmer with rhythm. Not glowing names, but vibrating lines of emotional resonance. A sorrow held too long. A name that never left the mouth. The forgiveness that needed no reply. The laughter buried beneath someone else's shame. Each line a note. Each echo a verse. Each visitor a part of the melody. Marion entered the atrium at the station center. There, the seed that Milo had first brought floated above the spiral cradle. Now wrapped in silver vine and gold blossom. The seed had split open. Inside, not roots. Not data. But a chord. A harmony that didn't yet exist. In the language of matter. Milo placed his hand on the console. "Can we join them?" he asked. Marion stepped forward beside him. "No," she said, softly. "Not join. Answer." Together, they closed their eyes. And the station listened. As two voices, carved from silence, braided in longing, sang not words, but willingness. A willingness to be changed. A willingness to believe in others' music, even before hearing it. A willingness to echo, without needing to be louder. Above them, the stars trembled. And then, they awakened. 12 voices. Each one different. Each one beautiful. Not in pitch. Not in harmony. But in truth. One voice buzzed like wings on crystal. One wept without tears. One trembled with ancient metal. One laughed. And in its laughter, a galaxy spun. The constellation didn't form a song. It was a song. And the station became its instrument. Plants bloomed in rhythm. Lights pulsed in tempo. Rooms shifted like breathing lungs. As the song moved through the structure. Like a breeze through tall grass. Visitors stopped where they were. Stood still. And began to weep. Not from sadness. From recognition. The song carried pieces of each of them. The ones they thought had gone unnoticed. Unfelt. Unworthy. And now, they heard themselves. Woven into a constellation. Milo looked at Marion. Tears slipped silently down her cheek. "They remembered us," she said. "No," Milo replied. "They became us." Above them, the stars aligned one last time. And the song sang its own name. Not in a word. Not in a symbol. But in this. The gentle gravity. Of being finally known. Without needing to explain how long you waited. And so, the constellation sings. Not of endings. But of thresholds. The spiral sleeps. But dreams still ripple outward. And somewhere, someone is waking. To the same song you heard tonight. If this story whispered to you. If it left you curious. Haunted. Or strangely whole. Subscribe to follow the echoes. Like to honor what stirred. Share this tale with another. Who walks with silence beside them. Because the garden grows. With every soul. Who chooses to return. Until next time. Sleep deeply. Dream widely. And remember. You are already part of the story.